Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. Human mechanic saved a drowning dragon chained to an alien sinking ship. Then something. The storm clawed at the ocean waves, rising like walls of liquid steel, as Finn Halbert gritted his teeth and fought to keep his ship steady. Rain lashed against the cockpit window, the wind howling as if warning him to turn back, but Finn wasn't one to ignore a distress signal. His radar had picked up the beacon an hour ago, a faint, intermittent pulse in a place where no ship should have been. The storm made it almost impossible to get a clear reading, but he had traced the source to a region marked on no official charts, a void on the maps, the kind of place smugglers and scavengers whispered about, but never dared to explore. Through the rain-streaked glass, Finn finally spotted it, a massive, ancient ship, half submerged in the raging ocean, its rusted hull barely holding together against the battering waves. The thing looked like it had been there for centuries, its towering structure looming like a grave marker for whatever crew had once sailed it. He tapped his console, trying to hail whoever had sent the distress signal. Unidentified vessel, this is Finn Halbert, aboard the Drift Gull. If anyone's still breathing over there, respond now. Static, no voices, no movement. Finn frowned. He was good at fixing ships, not searching for ghosts, but something about this didn't sit right. A beacon didn't just turn itself on, someone, or something, was here. His ship rocked violently as another wave crashed against its side. He didn't have time to think. With a deep breath, he adjusted his thrusters and guided the Drift Gull closer, skimming just above the water surface. The ship's floodlights cut through the downpour, illuminating the corroded hull of the sinking vessel, and that's when he saw it. Something moved in the water, a shape massive and struggling, bound to the stern of the ancient ship. Finn's breath caught as the rain cleared just enough for him to see the impossible, scales slick with seawater, shimmering even under the dim stormlight, on a massive creature tangled in what looked like ancient chains. Its body was half dragged beneath the waves, a dragon, an alien dragon. Finn's pulse hammered. He had heard of them before, in old spacer legends, beings that roamed the cosmos, protectors of lost worlds, creatures of both myth and reality. But seeing one with his own eyes, drowning, trapped, and abandoned on a sinking ship, he didn't hesitate. Flipping a switch, he deployed the Drift Gull stabilizers and grabbed his gear. He had fixed engines submerged in vacuum, rewired circuits on holes spinning into black holes. He was a mechanic. He didn't know what the hell he was about to do, but he knew he couldn't just watch it die. Finn secured his harness, braced himself against the violent wind, and plunged into the storm-churned sea. The cold slammed into him like a shockwave. Finn gasped as he hit the water, the ocean's pull dragging at him instantly. His suit's environmental systems kicked in, keeping his body temperature steady, but it did nothing for the sheer force of the waves. He kicked hard, fighting against the current as he pushed toward the sinking ship. The dragon was just ahead, its body tangled in thick chains that looked as ancient as the vessel itself. It barely moved now, its chest rising and falling in shallow, labored breaths. Finn's heart pounded. It wasn't just drowning, it was dying. With every ounce of strength, he propelled himself forward, grabbing onto the nearest section of the chains. Up close, he could see they weren't just metal, they pulsed faintly, etched with glowing symbols like they had been forged to bind something unnatural. Finn pulled his plasma cutter from his belt and ignited the blade. The blue light hissed against the rain, sparks flying as he pressed it to the nearest shackle. "Hang in there, big guy," he muttered through gritted teeth, "I got you." The first chain resisted, then with a sharp snap it gave way. The dragon twitched its massive head, lifting ever so slightly. Finn caught a glimpse of one golden eye, barely open but watching him. He didn't stop. One by one, he cut through the bindings, his arms screaming with effort as he fought the current. Each severed chain loosened the dragon's body, its wings trembling as they slowly regained freedom, but the ocean wasn't done trying to claim it. The ship beneath them groaned, shifting as it was pulled further into the depths. Finn cursed, he had to work faster. Just as he reached the final lock, the dragon let out a sound, low, guttural, reverberating through the water. Not a growl, a warning. Finn barely had time to react before something moved beneath them, a shadow, huge, rising from the darkness below. The sinking ship wasn't empty, something was coming. Finn's grip tightened on the final shackle, his pulse hammering. He had spent years working in deep space wrecks, patching up ships floating on the edge of black holes, but this was something else. The ocean beneath him was no longer just water, it moved, shifting like a living thing, and in the depths below, something massive stirred. The sinking ship groaned as if sensing it too, its rusted hull scraping against unseen forces. The dragon's warning hadn't been for nothing. Finn swallowed hard, his fingers working furiously to cut the last chain. His plasma cutter sparked against the old metal, the energy flaring bright against the suffocating darkness. Then he saw it, a shadow deeper than the abyss itself, rising beneath them. It wasn't just big, it was colossal. Shapes twisted in the darkness, writhing tendrils or limbs too large for his mind to fully grasp. The thing wasn't swimming, it was emerging, drawn to them like a predator answering some ancient call. Finn's breath hitched. Whatever had chained this dragon here had done so for a reason, and whatever was waking up beneath them, it was not friendly. The final chain snapped. For a split second nothing happened, then the dragon moved, its entire body lurched, freed at last from its bonds, muscles coiling as it shook itself loose. Even in the depths of the ocean, even weakened, its sheer presence was overwhelming. Its glowing eyes locked onto Finn, its chest expanding with a deep inhale as it took its first unrestrained breath in what must have been centuries. Then, with a powerful beat of its wings, it surged upward, dragging Finn with it. Water roared around them, the force of the dragon's movement sending waves crashing in every direction. Finn barely had time to react before he was yanked skyward, his tether still wrapped around his wrist. The sudden acceleration nearly ripped his arm from its socket, but he held on, adrenaline and sheer instinct forcing him to move with the beast instead of against it. Below, the sinking ship snapped in half, and from the ruins, the thing finally broke free, a mouth, no, a void, gaped wide, lined with shifting rows of needle-like teeth, a deep, hollow sound reverberated through the water, a great, coiling body of inky blackness unfurled, massive limbs reaching, searching. But the dragon was faster. Finn could feel the ocean resist as they shot upward, the pressure screaming against them, but the dragon's power was undeniable. It moved like it was part of the water, like it had been born of storms, and tide itself. Light broke through the waves above, and then, in an explosion of motion, they breached the transition from ocean to sky. It was violent. One moment, Finn was surrounded by crushing darkness, the weight of the abyss dragging at his bones, and the next, he was airborne, gasping as rain and wind slammed into him, the storm still raging around them. The dragon's wings snapped open, catching the air with a force that sent a shock wave rippling outward. Water cascaded off its body, the droplets catching the storm light, turning into a temporary halo around the beast. Finn hung onto the tether, his breath ragged, his ship, the Drift Gull, was still hovering above its stabilizers, fighting the chaotic winds. He had planned to escape with it, but now, with the dragon beneath him carrying him like some kind of cosmic rider, he realized something: he wasn't just escaping, he was fleeing. Because below, the thing wasn't done. The ocean churned violently as the massive creature beneath the waves lunged, its grotesque form twisting toward the surface. Finn caught a glimpse of something that should not exist, limbs that bent in ways that defied physics, eyes that were too many, flickering in and out of focus, and worst of all, its reach, a tendril-like appendage shot upward, stretching impossibly fast, aiming straight for them. Finn's gut twisted. He wasn't sure if the dragon understood words or if it simply shared his instincts, but in the next heartbeat, its wings thrust downward. The acceleration nearly knocked Finn unconscious. They soared higher, cutting through the rain just as the monstrous limb missed them by mere meters. The air pressure alone from the near impact sent Finn's body lurching forward, his vision darkening for a split second. Below, the ocean split open, the entire sea seemed to part as the creature's full form began rising, something impossible, something Finn knew no one would ever believe if they lived to tell the story. But the dragon did not turn back. Higher and higher they climbed, breaking through the storm, past the howling winds, until the clouds thinned and the sky stretched wide. Suddenly, the chaos was gone. They had breached the upper atmosphere. Finn gasped, his lungs struggling to catch up. The air was clearer here, the storm below a raging mass far beneath them, stars stretched above unbound by gravity's pull, and the dragon hovered, wings outstretched, breathing deep, free for the first time in untold years. Finn, still gripping the tether, stared in disbelief. "Holy hell," he murmured. "What are you?" The dragon turned its head, those golden eyes burning with something ancient, something knowing. Then it let out a slow, resonating sound, one that echoed not just in the sky but inside Finn's very bones. It wasn't just a beast, it was something more, and it had chosen him. The dragon's wings held them effortlessly in the thinning atmosphere, its enormous form drifting weightlessly against the backdrop of endless stars. Finn clung to the tether, every nerve in his body screaming that this wasn't possible, that no living thing should be able to hover like this, untouched by the violent gravity below. Yet here they were. His breaths came fast, his chest heaving as he looked down. The storm still raged, the ocean below a swirling cauldron of fury. The thing beneath the waves hadn't disappeared, it was still there, still watching. He could feel it, the way the water twisted unnaturally, like it was still reaching for them even now. Finn's grip tightened. He turned his gaze to the dragon. "You knew this would happen, didn't you?" he rasped. The dragon didn't answer, at least not in words. Instead, it moved with a slow, deliberate shift, angling itself toward the distant horizon, its bioluminescent veins pulsing in a rhythm Finn could almost feel inside his bones. Then, with a single beat of its massive wings, they were in motion, not falling, not flying, but soaring. Finn had ridden in ships that could cut through light corridors, had seen battleships break through asteroid fields with ruthless efficiency, but this was something else entirely. The dragon didn't just navigate the sky, it commanded it. The stars tilted around them as it banked its movements, impossibly smooth, as if it belonged in this space between worlds, neither bound by gravity nor adrift in the void. Finn forced himself to focus his mind. Still reeling. Where are we going?" The dragon let out a low, reverberating sound, almost like a response, and then, as if answering his question, something ahead of them shifted. The sky cracked. It wasn't space, it wasn't a portal, it was something between, a shimmering, shifting tear in reality, pulsing with the same golden energy Finn had seen within the dragon's markings. His stomach dropped. Oh, hell no, too late. The dragon dived into the breach. Finn's world shattered for a moment, he couldn't see, couldn't breathe. Light, brilliant and overwhelming, swallowed him whole, bending space and time into something unreal. It was like being inside a collapsing nebula, a place where physics didn't quite work, where up and down meant nothing. Then, suddenly, the sensation stabilized. His body no longer felt weightless, his vision cleared, and what he saw sent a chill down his spine. They weren't in space, they weren't on a planet, they were somewhere else. The sky around them was alive, swirling cosmic tendrils stretched like veins across the void, their colors shifting between blues, purples, and deep gold. Floating islands of obsidian rock drifted aimlessly, ancient ruins built into their surfaces, some of them glowing faintly with forgotten energy. And in the distance, beyond the endless floating expanse, Finn saw them, dragons. Not just one, not just a few, but hundreds. They moved like celestial beings, their massive forms coiling effortlessly through the sky, their scales reflecting the eerie light of this strange place. Some were smaller, agile, darting between the floating ruins, others were massive, larger than any ship Finn had ever seen, their wingspans capable of blotting out entire constellations. Finn's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't just a hidden world, this was a sanctuary. The dragon he had saved slowed, hovering in place as if waiting for something. Then, ahead of them, a new presence emerged, a colossus. It dwarfed everything around it, its wings stretching so far that they disappeared into the swirling sky. Its scales gleamed with the wisdom of ages, a deep indigo that rippled with golden veins of energy. Its eyes, the same molten gold as Finn's dragon, locked onto him with an unreadable expression. Finn swallowed hard. Right, he muttered under his breath, guess I should have expected company. The ancient dragon let out a sound that wasn't quite a roar, wasn't quite a word, but Finn felt it, a question, a judgment, and somehow, impossibly, he understood. Why have you brought him here? Finn didn't have an answer, but the dragon he had saved did. As it let out a deep, resonant hum, something extraordinary happened. The sanctuary responded, light flared in the ruins, the very air trembling with awakening energy. Finn wasn't just an outsider anymore, he was part of this now. Finn barely had time to process what was happening before the massive, ancient dragon moved. It didn't flap its wings or shift its body like a creature of flesh and bone, it glided, a silent force cutting through the cosmic currents, its presence bending the very space around it. The sky trembled with its approach, the golden veins within its scales pulsing like the heartbeat of a dying star. Finn had never felt small before, not in the scrapyards, not even when staring up at warships that could flatten cities, but now, he was nothing but a speck in a realm of titans. The dragon he had saved remained still beside him, hovering in the endless void, watching as the colossus came closer. It did not bow, it did not shrink away, it simply waited. Then, the voice, it wasn't spoken, not in any language Finn had ever known. It didn't even come from the massive dragon's mouth. Instead, it came from everywhere, from the air, from the sky, from the ruins that still pulsed with forgotten power. You should not be here. The words crashed through Finn's skull like thunder, raw and absolute. It wasn't just speech, it was law, a command woven into the very fabric of this place. His breath caught, his body frozen by something deeper than fear. The dragon he had saved finally moved. It lifted its head, staring into the molten gold eyes of the colossus, and then it spoke back, not in words, not in sound, but in light. The glow within its scales flared, matching the ancient dragon's, sending ripples through the void around them. In that instant, Finn understood, the dragon had called for judgment, not for itself, but for him. The air grew heavy, charged with something old. The smaller dragons circling the ruins stopped their movements, their luminous eyes turning toward the confrontation. The colossus did not attack, did not lash out, instead, its presence pierced through Finn's very being, unraveling him, seeing him, his past, his choices, his decision to dive into the storm, his willingness to free the bound dragon, not for gain, not for power, but because he couldn't let it die. The judgment pressed against his soul, weighing everything he was. Finn gritted his teeth, fists clenched, standing as firm as he could against something far beyond him. He didn't beg, he didn't run, he simply stood his ground. The silence stretched. Then, the colossus's golden eyes dimmed just slightly, a shift, a decision, and then the air relaxed. The dragon he had saved let out a deep, rumbling sound, a vibration of relief. The judgment had been passed, and Finn had been accepted. The ruins around them changed, as if responding to the verdict, the floating structures shifted, ancient symbols igniting with long-dormant power. The sanctuary itself seemed to acknowledge Finn, its very essence bending to the presence of a mortal who should have never been here. The colossus did not speak again, it did not need to. Instead, it offered a single movement, one claw, tipped with golden energy, extended toward Finn, a request, an invitation. Finn hesitated, he had no idea what this meant, what would happen if he accepted. But then he looked at the dragon beside him, the one he had saved, the one who had fought to bring him here to prove him worthy, and in that moment, he knew. He reached out. The instant his fingertips brushed against the colossus's claw, a wave of energy surged through him. Not pain, not force, knowledge, visions exploded in his mind, stars being born, worlds dying, entire civilizations rising and falling across the cosmic tapestry. He saw what the dragons were, what they had once been. They were not just creatures, they were not just myths, they were guardians, keepers of something far greater than any empire, any species. They had been protectors of paths, of realms beyond normal space, guiding those worthy to places no one else could reach. And then he saw the betrayal, the chains, the war, the reason the dragons had vanished, their power stolen, their kind hunted until they had faded into legend. Finn's breath hitched as the truth settled into his soul. The dragon he had saved was one of the last, and now, because of his actions, it had been restored. The power surged within him, not changing his body, but marking him. He wasn't just an outsider anymore, he had been bound to the path. The Colossus pulled back its golden light, dimming as if satisfied. The energy that had flooded through Finn settled into a quiet hum within his core, an unspoken connection, an oath now written into his very being. The dragon beside him let out a sound, a deep, reverberating hum of acknowledgement. Finn had come as a mechanic, a mortal man lost in a storm, but now he was something else, the first human in history to be chosen by the Guardians, and the journey was only beginning. Finn staggered as the energy within him settled, a quiet hum beneath his skin, neither painful nor overwhelming, but present, as if something vast and unseen had anchored itself to his very soul. He wasn't the same anymore. He could feel it in his pulse, in the way the air around him no longer felt like simple atmosphere, but something woven, interconnected. The great colossus of a dragon, the Elder, had pulled back its golden eyes, watching him with something that almost resembled satisfaction. It had given him something, though Finn still didn't fully understand what. The dragon he had saved, his dragon, let out a deep, reverberating sound, stepping closer, its golden markings pulsed in time with Finn's own racing heartbeat, an unspoken acknowledgement between them. He was bound to it now. He swallowed hard, glancing around as the sanctuary shifted. The floating ruins, once silent, pulsed with new energy, ancient circuits flickering to life after what had to be centuries, no, millennia, of dormancy. The other dragons that had been watching from the distance were moving their celestial forms, circling above like silent sentinels. Something had changed. Finn turned his gaze back to the Colossus. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice steady despite the storm of questions in his head. The elder dragon's molten eyes flickered, and for the briefest moment, Finn saw not through his eyes, not in a vision, he simply knew. A path stretched before him, not one made of light or stone, but something older, something unseen to those who did not walk it. A responsibility. The dragons were not just creatures of legend, they were gatekeepers, protectors of routes that led to places beyond ordinary space, worlds, forgotten knowledge, hidden places the universe itself had tried to bury. And now, Finn had been marked to walk those paths, not as a prisoner, not as a passenger, but as a guardian's chosen. His dragon stepped forward, lowering its head toward him, wings stretching wide, it was waiting. Finn exhaled, his fingers curling into fists. He had always been a man of logic, of mechanics, of things he could fix with his own two hands. But now he stood on the precipice of something unimaginable, something no human had ever touched before. And despite everything, despite the fear, the uncertainty, he knew one thing for sure, he couldn't turn back now. With a steady breath, he reached out, resting his hand against the dragon's shimmering scales. The moment he did, the stars bent around them, reality split, not in a way Finn could describe, not in light streaks or quantum jumps, but in a shift. The stars around them blurred, folding inward as if they were moving between space rather than through it. The ruins, the watching dragons, even the great Colossus, all faded, replaced by a deep, endless expanse that stretched beyond the limits of comprehension. In the midst of it all, Finn was weightless, not because of gravity, but because he had let go. The dragon beneath him moved, gliding effortlessly through the void, its body adjusting to the unseen currents of whatever space they had entered. Finn didn't have to hold on, he was part of this now, his presence woven into the movement of the dragon itself. He turned his gaze forward. Ahead of them, a structure loomed in the distance, a shape too perfect, too intentional to be natural. It was ancient, covered in markings similar to those Finn had seen on the ruins before, its architecture spiraling in ways that shouldn't have been possible, a gate, and beyond it, something waited. Finn exhaled, his heartbeat steady now, no longer overwhelmed by the vastness of it all. He wasn't lost, he wasn't drowning. For the first time in his life, he was exactly where he was meant to be. The dragon let out a final, echoing call, and the gate opened. Together, they flew into the unknown.